final das comemorações dos 30 anos do mestrado em Relações Interculturais. E é uma honra termos connosco o nosso orador, Marco Martiniello. Já o irei apresentar quando ele for falar, mas para já dava a palavra à professora Sandra Caeiro, pró-reitora para a investigação, para dar oficialmente as boas-vindas em nome da reitora, da senhora reitora.
Muito bem. Good afternoon to all, and sorry, Professor Marco, but then I will change to Portuguese, but at the end I will come back with the English. Muito boa tarde a todos. Em nome da senhora reitora, que não pôde estar presente neste evento, quero cumprimentar todos os presentes e, obviamente, agradecer o convite para fazer este importante encerramento das comemorações dos 30 anos do mestrado em Relações Interculturais da Universidade Aberta. Portanto, quero dar os parabéns pela iniciativa, por estas comemorações que duraram um ano, de um mestrado que é tão importante para a Universidade Aberta, e que esta organização durante os 30 anos e durante este ano de comemorações foi fundamentalmente através de diversas conferências que ocorreram ao longo do ano, sendo que há um ano atrás foi a primeira conferência com a sessão inaugural, depois a segunda conferência em novembro sobre corpos inclusivos, a terceira conferência sobre educação e diversidade em fevereiro, a quarta, arte participativa, em março, e a quinta conferência sobre políticas públicas para a integração de migrantes, que ocorreu em abril, e hoje a tão importante sessão de encerramento e que será constituída por uma apresentação pelo professor Marco. Nós sabemos que este mestrado é de facto uma marca de identidade para a Universidade Aberta, não só pela oferta educativa, mas também pela sua relação que tem numa área, num centro de investigação que foi pioneiro e que foi o primeiro centro de investigação da Universidade Aberta, o CMRI, e é uma formação que existe desde 1991. E é notório verificar-se que já ultrapassou o número de 500 teses que foram defendidas, sendo que 121 já estão em formato digital e disponíveis no repositório aberto, portanto com acesso aberto, e bastante de notar, tendo em conta que estamos na Semana da Ciência Aberta. Também queria só relembrar que uma das áreas de investigação e de destaque da Universidade Aberta, que embora existam outras, mas uma delas, e que está bem patente na política de investigação, é sobre a língua portuguesa e interculturalidade. Portanto, há aqui uma forte ligação entre a oferta educativa e a investigação na nossa instituição. Sabemos que na atual conjuntura internacional de insegurança e intolerância às diferentes culturas, o diálogo é fundamental, e nesta razão também a temática deste mestrado. Infelizmente, os valores atuais que nos mostram os relatórios mais recentes das Nações Unidas, o último relatório em relação ao cumprimento das metas do Objetivo de Desenvolvimento Sustentável, em 2003, mostra-nos na área do mestrado, e em particular em questão às desigualdades, que o atual panorama não é animador. Esse relatório mostra-nos que ainda ocorre discriminação em 1 de cada 6 pessoas, seja ela por raça ou por sexo, que só em 2022, apenas no ano 2022, cerca de 7.000 pessoas morreram devido a processos de migração, obviamente maioritariamente associadas a processos ilegais, e o número de refugiados também aumentou. 1 em 233 pessoas fugiram do seu país pelas suas diversas razões: guerras, conflitos, perseguição, violação dos direitos humanos, distúrbios de ordem pública. Isto só mostra, e achei que era importante mostrar estes valores, como é fundamental a formação e a investigação nesta área. Só pedíamos, por favor, para desligassem os microfones. E por isso é importante que todos devemos trabalhar no sentido de divulgar e disseminar o trabalho que é desenvolvido nesta importante área da Universidade Aberta, e onde é perfeita a ligação entre a investigação e a oferta educativa, sabendo à partida que podem sempre contar com o apoio da reitoria nesta questão. Por último, não queríamos, obviamente, em nome da reitoria, deixar de agradecer à coordenação do curso, à atual coordenação do curso, pela organização e por ter dado ênfase a estas comemorações durante este ano, pelas várias iniciativas das quais já referi, em particular aos colegas, à Bárbara Braxton, ao Paulo Costa e à Rosário Rosa, mas obviamente também todos os docentes e colaboradores e os estudantes e diplomados associados a este curso, que já são muitos. I'm going now to change to English because I want to give my thanks to Professor Marco Martiniello from University of Liège in Belgium, that will talk about a very interesting topic related with the roles of cities as a place for intercultural relation and social interaction. And we know that cities should be and are an important place of dialogue and harmony. So I thank you again for giving the opportunity and also to learn and dialogue about these very important issues. Por último, esperemos podemos estar todos aqui para as próximas comemorações, os mais uns 10 anos de 40 anos, e que também possamos mais uma vez comemorar. E resta-me obviamente desejar uma boa sessão de encerramento. Obrigada.
Muito obrigada, Sandra. Thank you. I will go just for our director 5 minutes maximum, and then we will start your speech.
Okay, thank you very much, Barbara, and thank you very much to all of you. I will address this first word in English just as a regard to Professor Marco Martiniello for his presence here among us, and I'm most expecting your brilliant exposure about cities and intercultural relationships. And now I will move to Portuguese just to the overall audience. Portanto, muito obrigado. Queria começar por agradecer à senhora Pró-Reitora, à nossa colega professora Sandra Queiro, pelas palavras de abertura, agradecer à coordenação do mestrado em Relações Interculturais, nomeadamente à professora Bárbara, ao professor Paulo e à professora Rosário Rosa pelo convite para estar aqui presente, ao professor Marco Martiniello, já agradeci e continuo a agradecer, a todos os professores, alunos, ex-alunos e membros da comunidade académica e em particular do mestrado em Relações Interculturais, a todos os colegas da UAB que estão aqui presentes e a todas as pessoas que nos acompanham nesta sessão. E de facto é uma grande honra poder estar aqui hoje, desta feita, para esta sessão de encerramento dos 30 anos do mestrado em Relações Interculturais, exatamente um ano depois da abertura destas comemorações, no passado dia 24 de outubro de 2022, onde também tive o privilégio, posso assim dizê-lo, de ter estado presente. Já foi aqui dito, ao longo deste ano, todos os eventos, ou uma grande parte dos eventos que foram tendo lugar, eventos meritórios e ilustrativos da importância que este mestrado tem para a nossa instituição, e também já foi aqui referido pela senhora Pró-Reitora, os resultados que têm vindo a ser alcançados em termos de número de graduados, em termos de número de dissertações produzidas, que só por si ilustram, digamos, o sucesso desta oferta formativa. E, portanto, eu, enquanto diretor do departamento onde este mestrado se situa, a partir do qual é oferecido, é um enorme orgulho estar aqui presente e só me resta homenagear os colegas que têm permitido, desde quem o criou até quem o mantém em funcionamento, e todos os que foram passando por esta oferta, e também os nossos alunos, homenagear, de facto, pelos resultados e pelo sucesso alcançado. Se estivéssemos presencialmente, eu pedi uma salva de palmas para as pessoas da organização e que estão ligadas mais a este mestrado, não estando, fazemos assim como se costuma fazer online e, portanto, fica a ideia e todos interiormente possamos bater umas palmas para a organização e para a coordenação deste mestrado. E isto para dizer que, tal como referi há um ano atrás, esta é uma área relevantíssima para a nossa instituição. Ela é, inclusive, tal como também referi, uma parte inquestionável do que é ser uma universidade aberta. Não se pode ser uma universidade verdadeiramente aberta se não tivermos esta capacidade de promover a interculturalidade. A diversidade que cotidianamente vai pululando nas nossas salas, nos nossos ambientes físicos e virtuais é, digamos assim, se calhar a primeira evidência deste facto. E se esta é uma evidência de há 30 anos atrás, onde houve o pioneirismo na nossa universidade de avançar com esta área das migrações e das relações interculturais, diríamos que nos dias de hoje esta é uma área sem qualquer questão muito relevante para o nosso presente, mas essencialmente também para o nosso futuro. E eu tenho uma explicação para a relevância desta área. Estamos no meio académico, uma tese que tem a ver, para explicar o porquê desta relevância, e que tem a ver aqui com porque é que isto é tão relevante. E a tese é muito simples, é pela falta de espaços. Eu vou explicar porque é que eu entendo que o problema e o que dá relevância às relações interculturais é a falta de espaço. Vou ser muito breve, porque me pediram para ser breve e vocês não estão aqui para me ouvir, mas sim para ouvir o nosso orador convidado. Mas vou remontar, vamos recuar 300 mil anos com o aparecimento do primeiro hominídeo, do primeiro Homo sapiens, parecido connosco, em África. E, portanto, surgiram os primeiros homens descendentes dos macacos, chamemos-lhe assim, dos primatas, de uma forma mais científica, e foram-se reproduzindo, foram evoluindo, foram desenvolvendo as suas sociedades, foram criando a sua cultura. E esse desenvolvimento foi relativamente simples, porque o espaço era bastante amplo e, portanto, eles foram crescendo e não tiveram, foram convivendo, mas não tinham que conviver muito. Quando aquilo não corria bem, iam saindo dos locais onde nasciam, iam criando novas comunidades. E assim passaram do continente africano, diz a história, não é 100% exato, mas há cerca de 100 mil anos começaram a viajar para outros continentes, começaram a surgir estas primeiras migrações, neste caso intercontinentais, sendo que o continente era algo relativo, porque era único e depois começou a afastar-se, começaram a criar os primeiros continentes, mas entretanto o espaço ia sendo cada vez maior e as comunidades iam sendo cada vez maiores. O que é que aconteceu? Com a saída dos mesmos espaços, começaram-se a criar diferentes culturas, porque cada espaço foi originando a sua própria cultura. E, portanto, isto era relativamente pacífico, mesmo assim, tanto quanto pode ser pacífico conviver na mesma cultura. Nós sabemos às vezes o quão difícil é conviver na mesma casa, pessoas que partilham a mesma cultura. Portanto, imaginem como será diferentes culturas, diferentes regiões a conviverem entre si, mas as relações eram ténues, porque efetivamente havia uma certa autonomia, não havia propriamente trocas entre elas até uma determinada altura. As questões e os problemas, efetivamente, que colocam as relações interculturais começam depois, mais tarde, numa chamada era das migrações modernas, mais recentes, em que, de facto, começa a haver começa a ser difícil sair para outros espaços e, pelo contrário, começam os espaços a relacionar-se entre si. Começa o comércio entre regiões, começa a globalização, se podemos chamar assim, e começa a haver estas migrações de pessoas já com culturas enraizadas para outros espaços onde prevalece outro tipo de culturas. E começam a surgir aqui estes primeiros problemas, o que se estima que aconteça para aí há cerca de 3, 5 mil anos atrás. Começam a surgir os primeiros problemas, as primeiras questões de relacionamento entre as pessoas. E começa-se a perceber que, de facto, as relações interculturais são muito importantes, porque, ao mesmo tempo que é importante preservar a cultura, é importante potenciar aquilo que as relações interculturais, que as relações entre povos com diferentes culturas podem originar. Uma maior compreensão global, e as relações interculturais promovem esta maior compreensão destas diferentes culturas e assim ajudam a superar estereótipos e preconceitos, promovendo uma convivência mais pacífica entre as nações. A partir desta compreensão global, promove-se a própria diversidade e o enriquecimento das sociedades com estas diferentes perspectivas, tradições e valores, o que vai originar, a determinada altura, um mundo mais plural e um mundo até mais tolerante. Uma lógica mais utilitarista do tema, esta compreensão intercultural ajuda a promover o próprio comércio internacional, ajuda a promover a diplomacia e a paz quando ela é precisa e a resolver conflitos que naturalmente se geram, e ajuda a construir pontes entre as nações, a evitar mal-entendidos que podem levar a confrontos entre diferentes povos, e ajuda a enfrentar muitos dos desafios globais, infelizmente hoje tão presentes no mundo. E estes desafios globais têm a ver com as chamadas alterações climáticas, ou emergência climática, como hoje se designa, as próprias pandemias, os fenómenos migratórios, simultaneamente causa e consequência desta evolução social a nível mundial, e, portanto, as relações interculturais são raiz para o próprio enriquecimento dos povos, das nações e das pessoas entre si. Portanto, é sem dúvida uma área crítica, uma área importante. E, portanto, aquilo que podemos dizer no mundo de hoje, que vive a chamada era das migrações modernas, onde este fenómeno migratório persiste, mas é um fenómeno migratório de características simultaneamente idênticas, mas também muito diferenciadas. Porque o que acontece hoje é, para além das migrações que víamos nos outros tempos, assistimos hoje, ou nos tempos mais recentes, a migrações dos povos e das pessoas, mesmo dentro do mesmo território, em busca de melhores condições de trabalho, condições de vida melhores, e mesmo até de refúgio, seja religioso, étnico, político, e as relações interculturais aqui assumem, mais uma vez, um papel crítico. Ao mesmo tempo, vivemos hoje cada vez num mundo menos rural, mais urbano, como com certeza iremos ouvir aqui falar, e onde as pessoas estão mais concentradas. E, portanto, o grande problema, e que dá relevância às relações interculturais, é a falta de espaço. A população cresce, o espaço é finito, as relações têm que acontecer, e têm que acontecer a um nível mais intenso, mais profícuo, e, portanto, é fundamental desenvolver esta capacidade de compreensão de diferentes culturas, diferentes valores e
Obrigada.
diferentes lógicas entre os povos. E, portanto, com o que eu quero dizer é que é, de facto, cada vez mais relevante esta área. Quero, com isto, relevar que há 30 anos atrás, se isto foi importante, estamos aqui, de certeza, para viver pelo menos mais 30 anos, onde isto vai ser cada vez mais relevante. Vivemos hoje num mundo, como conhecemos, infelizmente, com focos de tensão muito grande, de guerras que ameaçam toda a ordem mundial, e que as relações interculturais são cada vez mais relevantes. E, nesse sentido, eu só posso congratular-me com esta oferta, só posso desejar os maiores sucessos e as maiores felicidades para a continuidade desta oferta, e só posso dizer, enquanto diretor do departamento onde esta oferta está, e de uma representante também institucional da universidade onde esta oferta se encontra, que desejo os maiores sucessos na continuidade desta oferta e desejo que possam sempre continuar a contar connosco para providenciar todos os meios que são necessários para que esta oferta possa continuar. Mais uma vez, muitos parabéns a todos os colegas envolvidos, a todos vós que estão aqui, que representam a importância que esta oferta tem para nós, e desejo que esta conferência de encerramento seja o culminar de tudo aquilo que tem sido esta oferta e um prenúncio daquilo que vão ser os próximos 30 anos desta oferta. E daqui a 20 anos, que era bom que tivéssemos todos aqui a comemorar os 50 anos do MRI. A Sandra falou dos 10 anos, eu falo dos mais 20 para os 50. Era bom que todos estivéssemos. Obrigado por este momento, felicidades, e agora vamos àquilo que verdadeiramente interessa, porque estas palavras foram apenas de circunstância. Muito obrigado a todos.
Obrigada, Senhor Diretor. Eu não posso deixar de falar da pessoa mais importante que está aqui connosco, que eu convidei para fechar a sessão e dar umas palavras ao professor Marco, que é a professora Maria Beatriz Rocha Trindade. É uma honra também tê-la aqui connosco, professora. Eu não vou fazer o que tinha pensado fazer, que era apresentar o professor Marco antes dele falar, porque você já tem a biografia, está no cartaz e o tema também, mas devo dizer que há uma ligação desde os anos 91, 92, quando a professora Maria Beatriz fundou o MRI e o mestrado, em que o professor Marco e a professora Maria Beatriz foram juntos coordenadores da linha da Sociologia das Migrações na Associação Internacional de Sociologia, e o professor Marcos esteve no mestrado, esteve aqui conosco no mestrado e no Centro de Estudos das Migrações, numa conferência, pelo menos num evento em que veio cá à Universidade Aberta. Portanto, a professora está já a mostrar ali um livro. I was just telling the importance of Professor Maria Beatriz. She will make 5 minutes of closing with you in French, maybe, but now I will give you already the floor because of the time in Belgium is already 1 hour later than in Portugal. And thank you again, Professor Marco. It's an honor to have you with us today.
Well, good afternoon, good evening already. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's an honor for me, and I'm very pleased to see Professor Maria Beatriz Rocha Trindade. We haven't met for many years, but I still remember this great conference she organized in Lisbon in 1992. It was my first time in Portugal and in Lisbon. And I remember it, as an important moment for my career. So I will now try to share my screen.
Yes, please.
I hope it's going to work. Does it work?
Yes.
Excellent. So, okay. So the title of my talk today is Beyond Intercultural Relations, Social Interaction in Superdiversity. Actually, my two aims for this presentation is, the first one is a bit maybe optimistic, but we can discuss that later, is to show that in our societies that are heavily polarized, heavily racialized, heavily sometimes even segregated, and especially at the city level, there is something going on that sometimes we don't want to see, or that sometimes we don't want to pay attention to. It's what I call the emergence of a new global, post-ethnic, post-racial urban generation. And I will, of course, explain to you what I mean by that. And this is very visible, especially in artistic and cultural projects and practices that develop at the city level. And the second aim is to think with you about the ways we should think about how our cultural policies can encourage this evolution and maybe help the peaceful and positive living together in our super diverse cities. I will develop 5 points. First, the global context. Second, say a few words about the polarization, the division, and the fragmentation in super diverse city. And the third point is the central point of the talk is about this emergence of what I call local communities of artistic practices. And I will tell you why I think they actually move beyond intercultural relations. Then I will talk in a few minutes about cultural policies and conclude on a realistic note, I think. So, the global context. Well, we all know that in many European countries, there are lots of anti-immigration attitudes and movements. We see that in different countries, the governments are caught in a kind of dilemma when they talk about migration and asylum policies. And this is probably more obvious in a country like Italy than Portugal for the south of Europe. And it's certainly very visible in countries like France and Belgium, but also in Nordic countries. The second element I would like to stress is the issue of the persistence of racism. And here I would like to stress 3 points. Despite the fact that we have a body of legislation, both at the European level and in some countries at the national level, to fight against racism, racism is still there. First of all, there's a return of old-time racialism, a kind of, return of the biological racism that stresses the incompatibility between races defined.
Professor Marco, it's possible to make the slides in a full screen?
It is
because they are very
screen.
small.
It is full. I don't know. Let me see. On my screen, it's full screen.
Oh, okay.
How
Now
about
it's
this?
yes.
This is better.
Better. Yes,
Okay.
it's yeah.
I
Thank
work
you.
with 2 screens, and sometimes the
That's why.
commands are a bit difficult. So, yeah, a kind of return of old-time biological racism. Just to take an example, a few years ago, I was reading an article by a very well-known British psychologist who was trying to explain the economic underdevelopment of the south of Italy. And this explanation was that southern Italy is economically underdeveloped and will always be because of genetic problems. And he was saying that southern Italians are too close genetically to North African people in order to be successful in a modern economy. This is a typical example of things that you could read maybe in the 19th century, but certainly not after the Second World War until recently. Second point, we see a kind of, again, banalization of racist speech in different areas of social life, for example, in sport, where we can see in different countries that the number of racially motivated incidents has been growing over the past years, but also in daily life, in public transport, even sometimes in the mouth of politicians, there is a kind of banalization of racist speech. Third, and this is probably the most important, is that racial discrimination continues to persist in key areas such as employment, housing, education, relations with the police. I would add also public health, and I would say also immigration policies. And so actually, on the basis of that, there is also a kind of what I call the politicization of hatred across Europe, the US, and beyond. And so in many countries, you can actually win elections by encouraging racially motivated public policies and interventions. Well, in the country from where I am, in Belgium, the most important political party in terms of intentions of vote, we are going to see what's going to happen next year, because we have many elections next year, 4 elections. The first country is called the Vlaams Belang, Flemish Interest, which is a party that was created by nostalgics of the Third Reich after the Second World War, and it has clearly a very white supremacist agenda. The intentions of vote is 25% in Flanders, which is huge. It's higher than the UDC in Switzerland last weekend. Fourth element also is a kind of criminalization of mobilization against racism. And this varies from one country to another. But in some countries, it's very difficult to take stands against racism that go beyond, the symbolic dimension. Of course, everybody or many people say, well, no to racism. But when you have to transform that into real policies, there is clearly a difficulty. And people who struggle against racism are often and increasingly accused of encouraging racism, or maybe even creating racism, as if, racism would not exist and it would be an invention of anti-racists in order to secure a position of power in society. So this is a global context, which is, of course, variable from one country to another. I don't know how the situation is right now in Portugal, but in this part of Europe and in Italy, which I know best, these elements of the context are very important. Now, if we look at what's going on in the cities, it is clear that in many cities there is a kind of polarization, a kind of division according to the cultural, to the ethnic, to the religious, and to the racial belonging of people. Even though there is no ghetto in the strict historical sense, our societies are fragmented, our cities are fragmented. And I often take as an example the case of Brussels, which is, according to the public discourse, the second most cosmopolitan city in the world after Dubai. And what I always say is that it's the second most diverse city in the world, but certainly not the second most cosmopolitan, because precisely it is a kind of, it's a region, urban region, marked by all sorts of lines of division across ethnic, racial, socioeconomic, and linguistic lines. What we also see in many cities is that a strong sense of belonging to the local, to the neighborhood, to the district, to the place where people live. And in the work I've been doing with young hip-hop artists in the area of Liège and in Brussels, actually, they all speak about leaving the neighborhood, but they cannot do it because they love it at the same time. They hate it and love it at the same time. And they define themselves as much as a member of the local community as a member of a national, religious, or racial group. Do you also see a black a black line on the top of the screen or not? Or do you see the full slides?
We see the full slide.
Okay, that's good. So that's part of the reality: segregation, fragmentation, division, etc. And much of the discourse is on that. And in my work, I stress another dimension of our superdiversity. It's places where, following people like Peters, Harris, Wise, and others, places where what they call everyday multiculturalism develops. Work by Susan Wessendorf, when she talks about commonplace diversity. Work by Paul Gilroy on conviviality at the local level, and my work also on immigration and the arts. Actually, what we see is that in our divided superdiverse cities, there are lots also of border crossings between groups and move towards interculturalism. So I'm talking about exchange, I'm talking about mixing, I'm talking about new forms of solidarity that develop in our neighborhoods. And it's a kind of cosmopolitanism rooted in that belonging to the local, be it, the neighborhood or the district. This develops actually on the ground without any link with the normative thinking or theorization. The young people I observe, they don't know who Will Kimlicka is, they don't know who Charles Taylor is, but in a way they are more advanced in their daily experience than these theoreticians. So this develops, as I was saying, in mixed neighborhoods. We see a lot of intercultural sociability and conviviality, and mainly it characterizes one part of the urban youth, which is very diverse in many large European cities. And for these youngsters, the traditional forms of categorization based on race, ethnicity, migration, culture, religion, social class, sexual orientation lose salience in their daily life and in the processes of cooperation they develop. That's why I say that in a sense, they move beyond intercultural relations. Actually, it's not that they are colorblind. They know that there is division. They know that there is racism, but in their social practice and experience, they don't give such an importance to those dimensions. These practices are specifically visible in artistic and cultural practice. For example, in dance, in music, in theater, and generally in what people call urban cultures, which is an expression we should also discuss and deconstruct. But it is clear that in all that cultural and artistic dynamics, that's where you see this new generation that moves beyond the traditional forms of categorization. And I call them global communities of artistic practices. And I will explain why. First, for them, what matters is the project, the artistic vision. Wherever you come from, whatever is your religion, whatever is your skin color, whatever is your social class or your sexual orientation, if they share the same view of what should be done artistically, that's what matters. They develop what I call an anchored cosmopolitanism, because they are at the same time very rooted in their local context, but they are also very strongly related to what they see as similar groups elsewhere in the world. So you can have hip-hop bands from Brussels being in touch with hip hop collectives in Brazil, for example. And this is possible. These transnational connections are possible because of social media, because of internet. There are at the same time online communities and offline communities. Offline communities because, especially before COVID, and now it has started again, there are all sorts of networks where they can travel and meet and develop their artistic practice together. For example, there are dance competitions, urban dance competition all around the planet. And these youngsters, they travel, they attend these events, and they share, and they form that kind of community, which is at the same time locally rooted and globally connected around the same artistic practice, whatever the origin, the race, the culture, the religion. And to give you an idea of how it works, I don't know if I try to show a video, if it will work. Barbara, if it doesn't work, give me a sign. I will try to launch.
Okay.
It's one of these hip-hop bands I've been in touch with. And this is one of these competition. And this hip-hop band is from Brussels. And I will try to show you what they do. Does it work?
If it's going to open in your computer, maybe you must share the video, not the PowerPoint.
Saisissez les détails de votre véhicule et recevez le prix de vente, pas juste une estimation. Et après une simple vérification dans une de nos...
Doesn't work.
You have to share now the video. You can stop this and put the sharing of your video. It will work.
Nouveau partage. Oh.
Oui, vous sortissez du PowerPoint et vous allez partager le vidéo YouTube. Oui, ça.
C'est bon?
Oui, c'est bon. It's okay.
Sorry for the commercial. It's,
Yes.
Back to North Pole. Again.
When let me slide. Don't you know I got way too much pride? Sneak this away on the other side. I trail way too fast. I'm so tired. Somehow I still find the time. They care a little more about my rhymes. They care a little more about my peers. They think a little less about my fears. They care a little more about your ears. I give a piece of me to everybody I meet. Not because they want it, it's because it's probably in me. Claim they broke, but they probably asleep. And in case thinking if they make a meal, they be free like me. No, I turned a nightmare right into a dream. I keep my sanity because I ain't on the scene. I know I gotta be a rock like Dwayne. So I'm trying to be a rock like Dwayne. Carter, reverb, put that line in reverse. Add a little reverb. Yeah, we work, so my thing gotta be on t-shirt. Watch me get my hands dirty with the rework. Damn, do I even have the fans for this? To be rapping like these people understanding it. It's demanding it. But I stand for these kids like they stand for the kid. Understand that we clip, crack a beer when you feeling pissed. Yeah, but I ain't got nobody hand up my back, you ventriloquist. Ever since my songs went platinum like Cisco, like the fountain filter like Visco. Hey, but it's okay. But if you're down and you need a little help, it's a way. If you pay it and you feel it, it's secure, it's a rare. I'm somewhere in between humble and hell no. These drop, they say
I move a bit forward.
she tells me I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, I hate you, but I don't.
Chile.
Okay, I'm back to the slideshow. So what do we see here? You see 9 youngsters from Brussels. 2 are from Moroccan descent, 2 are Congolese, 1 is Filipino, 1 is from Albania, 1 is from Hungary, and the only Belgian is my daughter, who is Italian-Belgian. So this is Brussels. Some are Muslim, some are Christian, some are more upper class, some are more lower class. Actually, it doesn't matter. They develop their project together, and beyond the project, they develop their social life together, because they are really forming a community. They see each other all the time. They live together. They experience the city together. And I think this is one example. But when I did my observations in these festivals, there are many groups like that, coming from Switzerland, coming from France, coming from Germany, coming from, well, the places that I visited, there were no band coming from outside the European Union, from Italy, from whatever. And it shows that, you know, this is something that we should pay attention to, and not think this is just, you know, an epiphenomenon which is not sociologically and politically relevant. Now, this is another picture of one of the same band. You see that diversity, which is not problematic. That's what is important for my talk. They know they have different backgrounds. They know that there is racism in society, but what they do together is what matters, right? If we talk now about the cultural policies, how should we adapt to that? And you would have understood that my normative point of view is that it seems for me that it's much better to encourage that type of development than the type of development that we see in many parts of the world, where people kill each other just for what they are and not for what they can do. And so it seems to me that the authorities have a role to play, and they have to think about new cultural policies to develop in order to encourage that new generation, which is, as I was saying before, sometimes in advance, even with the academic production that we can read. There are 2 levels, at least, in the discussion: the cultural policies in a strict sense, and the so-called integration, local integration policies, including cohesion, urban policies, and local cultural policies. If we talk first about cultural policies, historically, cultural policies have been developed within the framework of the nation state, and therefore immigrants and the descendants of immigrants were not considered to be part of that. They were excluded of that. It's clear in France, there are works that show how, during the development of cultural policies in France,
Carissima Clara, sono molto contenta di sapere notizie tue. Lo sapevo.
I don't
Sorry.
know. No, it's okay. These policies developed by, you know, as if there were no diversity, no immigrants, no descendants of immigrants in society. And so now the question emerges, and I know it is there also in Portugal, through my contacts with some Portuguese scholars, is about what can cultural institutions do to support these diversification of arts and culture? Do local cultural policies become more multicultural, more intercultural? How do minority artists have access or not to the resources available in cultural policies? These questions are very hot, very difficult, and they give rise to all sorts of discussion and mobilization. If we look now more precisely and at so-called integration policy, I think that the question is to ask to what extent can arts and culture and the participation in these artistic and cultural projects contribute to construct a kind of shared local citizenship from below, therefore encouraging co-integration between the very diverse component of our cities. And here there are many examples that that exist in different countries, and I would like to again to show a video from a city adjacent to Liège, which is called Sessão. It is an old industrial city where unemployment is very high, where the population is very diverse, where there are many economic problems, many social problems, and the local association had this idea that maybe by using a cultural project, it would be possible to bring people together. And what they did is they created this urban festival that happens every year. And actually, what is important is not only the day of the parade in the city, but it's all the work that is done along the year to create really and facilitate the involvement of the citizens in the project. And it's called FRS-FNRS, and it's based basically on the history of the city, but the idea is to build this together. And in the beginning, when they started to think about the project, everybody thought that they were just, nice people, but dreamers, that it would never get anywhere. And now, actually, when the festival was interrupted because of COVID, the population of the neighborhoods mobilized in order to say, well, now that we had to stop for 2 years, when do we start again with the project? And so I do think that here, this type of project can really help people to have a better self-esteem, to also really feel that they are members of the city, of the urban community. Of course, this does not create jobs, but it's a kind of way of re-socializing citizens beyond the cultural, racial, and other forms of.
You want to share the video?
Yeah, I want to share the video.
Yeah, do the same as before. Share, close this and share the YouTube. Yeah.
It works?
Yes. There is no sound?
There is sound here. You don't hear the sound?
No, not me.
No,
Yeah.
I don't hear.
No, I think nobody.
Need to share with sound.
With sound, yes.
me stop or try to. Is it better?
If you share with sound. Share with
That's
sound.
what I did.
Someone can help.
Checking out the neighborhood, rolling down the street.
Now you can share with the sound, yes, but share also the video.
You are right, I am left, and what is left is right. The question is, it's getting serious, all eyes on the right.
Now we don't, you have nothing now.
Just the sound, just the
Just
sound.
the sound, yeah. Well,
Now we can have the both combination.
yeah. Let me try to see.
One step forward, two steps back. These times are not the best. Satellite editions in the east.
I don't know where I am.
All
I'm lost there.
shrugging shoulders.
You cannot share the video?
With the ill left.
No. Okay, anyway, well, you got the sense of it. I'm sorry.
Yes. And we
Uh,
have the link of we can have the link of the
Yeah.
YouTube. If you share with us the link, we can.
yeah, let me,
There are people asking if you will share your slides with us.
yeah, I will share. I will share
Okay.
the slide.
Fantastic.
Now, I made a mess here, so now. Bear with me, I'll be right back. Huh?
You want the PowerPoints again?
Yeah.
You lost it?
I lost it, yes. But, I don't see the where I can share again. Voilà, okay, it moved
Yeah,
down.
share yeah.
Wow. So actually, before going to the conclusion, you know, this example, and you can watch it carefully at home. It's really an experience that, again, tries to create a sense of community, to encourage participation in a super diverse city, whatever the origin, the religion, the skin color, etc. And it works, actually. And in that city, there is no space for a far-right party, for example. And the tensions between the population are relatively minor compared to what can happen in other cities that do not develop these participatory artistic projects. So what would I like to conclude about that is that, you know, in a short term, I think it's very difficult to be optimistic. It's difficult to be optimistic because of the economic, social, political difficulties. Intergroup conflict is very strong. Racism is still very strong. Exclusion is still very strong. And so that persists at the local level. And we still have, in many European countries, this idea that we should either assimilate or expel those who are supposed to be the representatives of diversity. But I think that in the longer term, things are changing, and we see that with this young generation. And if we go even below, if you look at what's going on with kids, I think that even if we don't want to, we are making, growing a generation that is used to diversity, that doesn't have the same stereotypes, doesn't have the same negative attitudes towards diversity than previous generation. And so I do think that in the long run, things might be a bit better, but I do think also that public interventions are necessary, maybe not sufficient, but I do think that the states and the local authorities should really invest and revise their policies and be innovative and try to promote these trends that we are observing in different cities. I know that there are many projects, cultural projects in Lisbon that go in the same direction. I know that in the UK, there are many things that develop in that direction as well in many countries. And this is something that, in my view, is, is a source of a kind of quiet optimism for the future. I will maybe stop here in order to have some time for a discussion. And I'm very sorry for the technical problem. Sorry for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. No problem at all. Now we will have like 20 minutes for discussion, and Professor Maria Beatriz will have a small talk also in French, I think.
Ok. Je peux parler en français aussi, hein, y a pas de problème.
Oui, en français aussi. Quem quiser pedir, colocar questões ao professor Marco em inglês ou em francês, pode pôr a mãozinha para darmos a palavra. Alguém há pouco disse que gostava de colocar uma questão. Luís, isso.
Olá,
Pode,
boa tarde.
pode aparecer ou não, não pode ligar a sua câmara.
Sim, só um momento.
Pronto. Obrigada, Luís.
Pronto, sim, está melhor. Olá, boa tarde. Pronto, eu estive aqui a escrever uma...
Mas tem que ser ou em inglês ou em francês, para o professor Marco.
Em inglês.
Sim, sim.
Can it be in English, Professor Martiniello? Hello?
Yes, no problem.
Well, my question was about one thing specifically you told in the well, let me retry. I'm talking specifically about the case of Portugal, where immigration has increased unregulated due to immigration policies that are, in my opinion, too liberal. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm sorry for my English.
No, it's fine.
And what I was looking for was an opinion from you, Professor, if you find it relevant. It's about what do you think? Do you think that a nation's immigration policies, when there is a need to restrict and regulate them, like the actual case in Portugal, do you think they could be understood or confused with racism?
Mm-hmm.
The need, I don't know if I...
Yeah.
Because if there is a need for that, for restricted policies, can this be confused or interpreted as racism?
Yeah, it's a very difficult and interesting question. Well, I'm not qualified to speak about the Portuguese situation precisely, but let me tell you that in abroad, Portugal is often seen as by its positive sides on immigration policy and on integration policy. There have been developments in Portugal that are, much more appropriate than what some countries like France, etc., do in terms of, for example, in integration of immigrants. When the city of Lisbon had this unique place where immigrants could go and find, how to get a job, how to get a education, this thing. It was considered as something very positive outside of Portugal. Now, about immigration policy, which was not the topic of the talk, I think that if you look in the long term, everybody agrees that without immigration, Europe will decline even quicker.
Okay.
The problem right now is that we tend to not recognize that. And is there, in current immigration policy, is there a racist dimension? I would say yes. Let me tell you.
But it's a necessary. It's necessary.
I don't think it is necessary. What is necessary is to
regulate the policies of immigration.
Yes, but what is racist is that when you are talking about people from Ukraine, just because they are white and Christian, they come open arms and so on. Whereas when people were coming from Syria, they were not welcome. So I do think that Europe has a problem with its relations with the south of the world, because maybe we have difficulties in accepting that we are not imperial powers anymore. And I'm talking about Belgium, I'm talking about France, I'm talking about the UK. Again, I don't know in Portugal what the situation is in terms of that. But I'm not sure that we need to build a fortress Europe. We need to have at the same time more legal avenues for immigration, and of course take the example of the terrorist attack in Brussels last week. We don't need, of course, that type of person anywhere. And it's clear that this person or people like him should have been more controlled and maybe kicked out of the country before, because it seems now that that person went to Norway, to France, to Italy, to Tunisia, where he comes from. He was there. Everybody knew where he was, and nobody did anything. So this is a problem, but it's not a problem linked to strictly into immigration policy, but to security policy. And on the other hand, you have many people who are in an irregular situation in European countries that do contribute already now to the economy. Without irregular migration, there is no agriculture in Spain and in Italy, for example.
Yeah.
So the situation is very, very complex, but and we have to make a difference between the short term and the long term.
Long term, yes.
So, and there are tensions. It's quite difficult, but the politicians should not make the population believe that you can stop total immigration, because we know it's not possible.
Yes.
So you have to try to organize.
The goal is not that. It's just to have a better screening of the.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I agree. Taking the example I mentioned of Brussels, I mean, of course, I agree. Yeah. But the question is, why don't we do it with all the technological device we have? Open question.
Yeah. Thank you very much
Thank you. Thank you.
for your answer. Thank you very much.
More questions? Perguntas? Mais perguntas para o professor Marco? Peço desculpa, estou com um trânsito horrível aqui na rua, vou apagar o microfone, mas... Lia?
Boa tarde. Now in English, I would like to ask Professor Martiniello if he feels that the phenomenon of arts in cities could be felt somewhere along sports, because I believe in sports the goal is the team, the progress, the result, and there is an opportunity to create communities and build multicultural relationships. And I would like to know if the professor shares that idea and if there are studies about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, because actually in my perception, there are very many similarities between sport and arts. And it is true that sport can be, as you were saying, this place where people meet, get to know each other, get to work together to reach a result that will be positive for everybody. And so I do think that sport is very important. In another research, we are working on that. And for example, we've developed initiatives with the professional football team in Standard de Liège here, where if you look at their academy, where the kids go, you see all that diversity. The kids play together. They don't care about racial division and so on. But the problem sometimes is the parents. The parents are problematic because they don't have that same idea. And we see now an increase of racist attitudes in football in Belgium, especially amongst the parents. And so that goes a little bit in the direction of what I was saying. It seems that the kids have more keys for the solution than the parents sometimes.
The kids are the problems.
Yes.
I feel that so. I believe among kids in sports, either football, handball, basketball, gymnastics, I see kids from all parts of the globe with different languages practicing like if they talk the same language.
Yeah.
And mostly, I believe they teach their parents because of games and events that parents have to talk to each other and regulate and transport and be together. And sometimes it builds even a familiar community. It's nice to see.
Yeah.
Thank you for the answer.
Peço desculpa, Porfírio. A professora Maria Beatriz pediu a palavra antes da Lia e eu estava aqui a gerir as várias mensagens. Não queria dar a palavra à professora Maria Beatriz. Sim, com certeza. Depois falará, Porfírio, também. Professora, pode ligar o microfone.
Est-ce que vous m'entendez? Pouvez-vous m'entendre? Pas tellement. Je vous demande si vous m'entendiez.
Je vous entends.
Je vous entends. Allô Marco, comment vas-tu?
Comment ça va?
Quelle joie de te voir.
Moi aussi, vraiment.
On a vieilli, moi plus que toi, de toute façon. Je me rappelle très bien des années 90 et tout ce qu'on a fait depuis. en collaboration avec toute l'Europe, n'est-ce pas?
Ouais, c'est très bien.
Alors,
On est toujours là, c'est le principal. C'est bien.
tout premièrement, je te remercie énormément et grâce à Barbara et à toi, nous sommes devant toi et je te félicite et je me félicite pour t'avoir entendu. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Une des choses que je voudrais vraiment dire à ce propos de l'inclusion, c'est que dans notre Assemblée de la République, avec tous les députés, a été faite une proposition pour inclure dans l'enseignement portugais au niveau de l'école primaire, basique, secondaire et universitaire, l'enseignement séparé des migrations et pas inclus comme d'habitude dans l'histoire, la géographie, la démographie. Ça s'est passé en 2017 et jusqu'à présent, rien. Et à mon point de vue, ce que c'est triste, c'est que vraiment les Portugais et d'autres Européens ne savent pas, ne connaissent pas tout ce qu'ils doivent aux immigrés et tout l'aide que les immigrés ont donné vraiment au niveau du travail, mais aussi au niveau universitaire, et tout cet échange soit complètement oublié. Je ne sais pas quelle est ton opinion, mais je crois que l'inclusion de l'enseignement des migrations à tous les niveaux pour mieux faire comprendre les migrations et tout ce qu'on doit aux émigrés, ça serait très important.
Oui, tout à fait. Je suis tout à fait d'accord avec ça. Et ben, ici en Belgique, commence à y avoir des initiatives aussi très intéressantes qui sont menées par des jeunes d'origine immigrée eux-mêmes qui prennent en main le fait de raconter leur histoire et l'histoire de leur famille, comment ils sont arrivés. Et donc, j'ai participé à ce projet qui a été fait par 3 jeunes femmes, une d'origine congolaise, une d'origine serbe et l'autre d'origine marocaine, qui ont pris l'initiative de faire des podcasts, comme on dit maintenant, où ils interviewent un parent et un enfant. Donc, le parent, maman ou papa qui est arrivé d'ailleurs, et l'enfant qui est né en Belgique. Et ils racontent tout ça et ils montrent en fait comment cette présence-là a enrichi la société belge et que maintenant, la Belgique, c'est cette société-là diversifiée. Et ils le font parce que dans l'enseignement, on ne le fait pas encore suffisamment, en fait. On considère toujours que c'est quelque chose qui ne fait pas partie de l'histoire nationale et pourtant, un pays comme la Belgique est marqué profondément par son histoire migratoire. C'est la même chose de la France, c'est pas à toi que je dois l'expliquer, et le Portugal, évidemment aussi. Donc, c'est effectivement très, très important, oui.
Je m'excuse et je ne veux pas établir un dialogue, mais je crois que l'université ouverte perd un grand moment parce qu'elle serait douée pour prendre en main cette proposition faite à l'Assemblée de la République et faire des propositions au niveau du ministère de l'Éducation pour faire la formation des maîtres, des professeurs de secondaire et vraiment de faire des grands programmes d'information sur un des plus importants phénomènes sociaux actuels du Portugal.
Tout à fait.
Merci. Passo ao professor Porfírio.
Excusez-moi. Je vais essayer de mettre ma question en français. Excusez-moi pour les français qui est très, très difficile maintenant parce qu'on est habitué à l'anglais, mais je vais essayer.
Pourquoi ne parlez-vous anglais? You can speak English.
Okay. Oui, mais je vais essayer de parler en français. Pas de problème, pas de problème. Merci. Non, ma question, c'est la suivante. Un autre jour, quelqu'un m'a montré un épisode à l'Internet ou dans une manifestation où il y avait beaucoup de gens qui brandissaient les placards en faveur de la migration, un reporter qui se faisait passer par une ONG, une organisation non gouvernementale qui cherchait des logements pour les immigrants, demandait aux personnes s'ils pouvaient donner son adresse ou son aide pour loger les immigrants pour les pays. Et la situation, c'était un peu ridicule parce que presque tout le monde, en YouTube, tout le monde, mais j'imagine que presque tout, disait non, je n'ai pas d'espace, je ne sais pas comment on va résoudre la question du logement pour les migrants et tout, et des réponses comme ça. Ma question, c'est, dans une société avec plus d'éducation, des personnes plus sensibles à la question de l'immigration, effectivement, je pense que ces résultats, c'est la preuve que la plupart des gens adhèrent à cette question d'appuyer l'immigration pour une question presque je ne sais pas comment on dit en français, de fashion. C'est normal que tout le monde dise ça, mais au final, quand on va chercher des questions, des solutions concrètes pour le problème, personne ne sait pas comment le faire et se met au dehors de la solution. Comment on peut éduquer les personnes et faire que ça, peut-être une question vraiment réelle pour la majorité des personnes et qu'elles sont effectivement involucrées en chercher des solutions concrètes pour l'immigration et pour l'inclusion de ces personnes dans la société. Je ne sais pas si j'ai été clair dans ma question.
Vous avez été très, très clair.
Merci.
Non, mais à nouveau, c'est compliqué, mais je crois que il faudrait que nos dirigeants aient un discours plus nuancé et plus solide sur la question. Souvent, en tout cas, à nouveau, je ne parle pas du Portugal en particulier, parce que je ne suis pas l'actualité politique du Portugal, mais dans ce pays-ci ou en France, on voit que les femmes et les hommes politiques, souvent, n'ont pas des messages appropriés qui sont de nature justement à entre guillemets, éduquer la population. Donc, je crois qu'il faudrait parler vrai, dire effectivement qu'il y a toute une série de difficultés, que c'est compliqué pour différentes raisons, mais que aussi nous sommes dans des pays où, si vous prenez la Belgique, il y a je ne sais pas combien de métiers qui sont en pénurie. Donc, on ne trouve pas des personnes pour travailler. Et le patronat dit, mais la seule solution, c'est soit d'utiliser les personnes migrantes qui sont en situation irrégulière dans le pays, il y en a beaucoup, soit de faire venir des personnes de l'étranger, comme on l'a fait après la guerre, etc. Et donc, il faut le dire aux gens, mais il faut dire aussi que ce n'est pas nécessairement facile, puisque nous vivons surtout dans certaines villes, il y a une crise du logement sans immigration déjà. Je crois qu'à Lisbonne, vous êtes aussi dans une situation maintenant où il est plus difficile de trouver des logements qu'il y a 20 ans ou 15 ans. Et donc, il y a plein de difficultés, mais je pense que je crois qu'il faut commencer à parler vrai et à imaginer notre futur avec cette diversité, parce que elle est là et elle va pas disparaître. Et je répète, je crois que souvent dans le nord de l'Europe, il y a une espèce de sentiment de supériorité, mais je crois que les efforts qui ont été faits au Portugal peut-être ne sont pas suffisants, je ne sais pas, vous le savez mieux que moi, mais sur bien des dossiers, le Portugal a été à l'avance sur les pays du nord de l'Europe. Et ça, je crois qu'il faut le dire aussi, parce qu'il y a eu peut-être un message qui a été plus réaliste à certains moments dans la société portugaise. Mais voilà, je tiens à le dire parce que c'est important. Merci.
Pardon. Merci encore une fois, professeur Marc. Maintenant, Rosana Albuquerque.
Hola, good evening. Thank you for the master team, my colleagues at Universidade de Liège to organize this conference. Thank you to Professor Marco Martiniello to be with us. I have a question, and it's a question from a person that researches the migrations and racism and inequalities in Portugal since 20 years ago, or for 20 years in MRI, in the research center of that was created by Professor Maria Beatriz Rocha Trindade. I'm a researcher of the center. And the context of Portugal, I think, is very similar to what Professor Marco Martiniello said, of the general context. About the persistence of an everyday racism and racist discourses in spite of all the good political policies that we have been implementing in Portugal. Although the practice of the policies and the legislations is very different from the framework of the policies themselves, as we know. But how can we, as social scientists, as researchers, we have great risks in the future nowadays, in the future that we want to build as a common community. How can we? What can we do to face this context where, well, it's like the integration policies, the political participation policies, all this set of research linked to a policy implementation. Perhaps I think it's so. There are several gaps. There are several failures that persist. What can we do as researchers, as social scientists, to make what is being done by these young and adults at the cultural field, at the arts field, at the sports field, with this very, very, very positive integration and acceptance and recreation of one common ground in spite of the differences and above the differences. How can we make this into the status quo of the policies, into the structures? Because inequality, it still persists, and employment, education, housing, political participation, full citizenship, the structure itself it has gaps. We know there are gaps. And maybe and this all this richness of the margins, the cultural, the arts, the sports, of course we know that, but how can we make this positive intervention into the mainstream, into the core of the policies? Like, for instance, gender mainstream in Europe has been very successful in spite of all the gaps there still are between men and women, of course, but there is a gender mainstreaming in the political discourse and in the practice of policies. And we don't have a race, in commas, of course, a race mainstreaming to combat structural inequalities and to combat the persistence of invisibility of Black Europeans in our societies. What is our role as social scientists and researchers and as citizens, of course? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I think that, well, our first role is, of course, to document and to try to understand and explain ourselves. But I think that, you know, we have to be engaged. We have to work with stakeholders. We have to work with NGOs. We have to work with authorities. And I think that local level can be promising sometimes. Well, of course, depending in which city you live, but you may be in a city which is totally closed to these developments. But sometimes, you know, there are windows of opportunities, and you can, you know, I would say even convince the authorities that, you know, this avenue of sports and arts is really something that can be pursued, and that could lead also to the creation of jobs and things like that. Just an example, in 2017, I was a visiting professor in Geneva, in Switzerland, and there in Geneva, when I was there, I had contacts with the city of Geneva, and they invited me the year after to discuss with the civil servants of the city, and the equivalent of the mayor was really convinced that culture and arts were very important, not only per se, but also to try to contribute to resolve all these problems of you know, discrimination, also in the symbolic space and so on. And I've seen this 2 or 3 weeks ago that now it has become public policy in Geneva. I'm not claiming that it is my success, but I think that, you know, I contributed a little bit to that. And when I work in Liège, we are also working with the city. We are developing this project of engaged social science, where, you know, we know that if we just write a report and an executive summary, they will not read it. And even if they read it, they don't care. But if we engage, you know, on a regular basis with the authorities, I think that maybe we can contribute to make micro changes. But I don't think that there is one unique big solution that could help us to really solve all these problems. But at least I think it's important also as social scientists to keep as much as possible, an independent voice, and you know, to try to react when really people say nonsense about these issues, you know. And it's increasingly the case, at least in this part of the world. And so I think we have to intervene by trying to use the new media in a more positive way. So far, it's been more used in a negative way, but also the traditional media, and I repeat, the engagement with the stakeholders. And that's why in my center, we privilege working with NGOs, with artists, with journalists, with photographers, with whoever is involved, with the business owners as well, in order to try to create progressively this a more really truly non-discriminatory, more egalitarian perception of society. But of course, sometimes we see small progress, and then there is something happening in Gaza or in Israel, and the 10 years you've worked can disappear in 5 minutes, because the situation is so unstable that it is quite difficult. But micro solutions through engagement would be my short answer. Sorry for that. I have nothing more.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
It's a great issue. Yes, it's a good advice.
Avant de donner la parole à Catarina, Hermano Carmo est avec nous aussi maintenant. Hermano, English, French, Portuguese, hermano, is one of our pioneers also in this master relations, intercultural relations degree. Un des premiers professeurs aussi du cours. Il est ici avec nous, hermano. Bienvenue. Queres falar? Abre o microfone. Não sei se ele está a ouvir. Catarina?
Mas não tenciono perguntar nada.
Ok, ok. Bem-vinda, obrigada por estares aqui também. Catarina? Com som?
Not top up. We can't hear you.
Não, Catarina, não ouvimos.
Ainda não?
Yes.
Agora sim.
Ok. Então, boa tarde a todos e a todas. I'm a student of the Intercultural Relations PhD at Aberta, and I have a specific interest in the research of integration and of forced migration. I'd like to ask Professor Martiniello if the rise of these initiatives of artistic practices can it be seen as a form of resistance to marginalization in the acculturation sense, as a very specific strategy of integration? And also, how do you think this is felt by people with far-right inclination?
Well, on the first part of your question, thank you for it. It's clear that the people on the far right, and especially when they are in government or close, they are very negative about that. You know, for example, here in the Royal Theatre, Royal Flemish Theatre in Brussels, they decided to, in 2017, to have a play on Malcolm X, and on stage were rappers, jazz players, dancers, and so on, from very diverse background, and revisiting the life and contribution of Malcolm X. The next day, there was a question in the Flemish Parliament saying, do we really need to spend the citizens' money to destroy the white race, or something like that, you know? So they were very, very, very negative. But the first part of the question, I think that, you know, sometimes this expression can be also a way to express political views, because, you know, people and political scientists always say that the youth are not interested in politics. Well, maybe they are not interested in party politics, in traditional party politics, because of the discipline, because of the lack of voice you really have in party, and some express themselves through the arts, be it theater, be it music, and so on. And I think it's very rich, you know, when you read some lyrics, when you go to some place, there's really something there. And also, it can be a way to struggle against labor market discrimination, because many of these projects help, well, support the artists that can make a living about that, with that. And so they can become small artistic entrepreneur and define their, well, and create their job themselves. So there are many positive points. And of course, we know that here the role of the public authorities and the money spent by the state on culture can be important, but some prefer not to take the money, to preserve their independence and organize their alternative circuit of distribution of their music and their merchandising and things like that. And many of them, they just live like that, and they tour. You never hear them on the radio, you never see them on TV, but they do have their own network where they develop their artistic practice. So yeah, it's very rich as a field, and I do think it's very important for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we are going to close. On va terminer. Je vais passer la parole à professeur Maria Beatriz pour fechar esta sessão com a cereja no topo do bolo. Fechamos as comemorações Merci a tous, obrigada a todos e esperamos contar com mais 20, 30 anos de mestrado. Já tenho um filho grande que é o doutoramento, portanto, il y a maintenant le doctorat aussi, ici à l'université. On espère compter avec le professeur Marco pour venir nous visiter et
Avec
pour
plaisir.
partager encore une fois au master et PhD.
Merci
Compte
à
avec vous. Merci.
Merci.
Mais passons a parole à Maria Beatriz, professora.
Tem que ligar
Estão
o...
a ouvir agora? Estão a ouvir, pronto. Então eu começo pela nossa língua, pelo português, e quero agradecer muito aos organizadores, a minha relação mais próxima com a Bárbara, mas também aos colegas. Para os três vai um grande agradecimento pela tarde tão agradável que nos proporcionaram. Maintenant, je comprends très bien l'anglais, mais je ne me sens pas très sûre. Alors, je vais parler en français une fois que Marco Martiniello habite en Belgique et il parle aussi bien le français que l'anglais et l'italien, naturellement. Je suis très émue par tous les éloges que les représentants du rectorat de l'Université ouverte de Lisbonne ont fait à propos des migrations et des relations interculturelles. Ils n'ont pas cité les noms des fondateurs, mais ça n'a aucune importance. Probablement, ils n'étaient même pas là à cette époque. Mais vraiment, nous étions pionniers dans cette ère, dans cette ère universitaire au Portugal. Et je crois qu'on a fait un très bon travail, toute cette équipe, pour montrer au niveau universitaire et plus que ça, une des caractéristiques principales de notre pays, la mobilité. Nous étions un pays d'émigration, d'ex-migration, et maintenant nous sommes un pays de migration et on prend beaucoup plus d'attention à l'immigration, in-migration, qu'à l'immigration. De toute façon, je crois que c'est très dommage qu'il n'existe pas une articulation entre les deux phénomènes. Une fois que nous avons développé une politique très avancée dans le premier domaine, ex-migration, et que toute cette politique pourrait bien inspirer ceux qui développent maintenant l'actuelle politique sur ce qu'on reçoit. Pour l'inclusion, je crois que l'université ouverte pourrait même donner un exemple assez curieux. C'est qu'on a organisé, comme vous savez, l'université ouverte, c'est une très nouvelle université par rapport aux universités traditionnelles. Il faut la montrer et faire croire aux autres universités et à tout le monde qu'il avait de la qualité et qu'elle avait des intérêts actuels et de très bons, très qualifiés professeurs. Alors, dans une de ces initiatives, je me rappelle qu'on a organisé une série de spectacles qu'on a nommés comme Relações Interculturais, relations interculturelles, où on présentait des danses, des spectacles de danse de plusieurs pays, du Cap-Vert, de Goa, des provinces portugaises. Et c'est pour ça que j'ai adoré vraiment la communication de Marco Martiniello, parce que ce sont deux chemins qui, d'une certaine manière, s'articulent circulent et pourraient avoir un suivi très, très intéressant en récupérant ce que nous avions fait à l'université et ce que tu proposes maintenant et toute l'interprétation qui tu proposes de ces manifestations culturelles différentes, mais qui d'une certaine manière confluent. De toute façon, je crois que la collaboration qu'on a eue à un très niveau et très diversifié dans ce centre puisse continuer. C'est un de mes meilleurs désirs parce que c'est en écoutant ce que les autres font et en proposant aussi des recherches interliées qu'on peut avancer dans la compréhension et dans l'actuation politique. Et si l'université aussi proposait enfin une collaboration à ce comme l'ISCTE fait avec le secrétaire d'État de l'immigration, si l'université ouverte pouvait proposer une articulation plus étroite et plus profonde avec ceux qui ont le pouvoir politique, je crois qu'on avancerait énormément dans la formation, la compréhension, l'actuation dans ce monde où nous vivons. C'est un monde de diversité, pluralité et pluralité sociale et culturelle. Un très grand merci et je ne peux pas laisser d'exprimer une fois de plus la joie que j'ai eue de voir et d'écouter Marco et de le classer, si je peux, comme un des plus brillants et meilleurs connaisseurs de ce phénomène dans l'Europe. Merci beaucoup à tous et merci pour que je puisse être là en vous entendant. C'était une joie extra. Merci beaucoup.
Je ne sais pas si on peut faire ça, applaudir en Zoom.
Non, comme ça.
Mais merci beaucoup, professeur Marco et professeur Maria-Beatrice. C'est pour ça qu'on est ici 30 ans après.
Bonne nuit.
Merci encore une fois. E vamos então dar por encerrada esta sessão. On va partager la vidéo après. On vous envoiera. Si vous voulez aussi partager les slides, il y a des étudiants qui sont très intéressés, des chercheurs. C'est très utile aussi. À la prochaine. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.